Lovely. Thank you very much, Chris, and welcome to everybody. Thank you for coming along to this webinar this evening. So this is one of the England Athletics webinar series, and just a quick thanks for Chris for inviting me along to do this today to talk about clean athletics. I am going to turn the camera off, if you don't mind, because it's quite distracting seeing myself talking. And you don't really need to see me because we'll be going through a PowerPoint presentation. But I just wanted you to see my face before we started. So I'm going to turn my camera off now. Sound, hopefully, yeah, sound seems to be still there. So I'm just going to take you through as the first slide. This is obviously a PowerPoint-based presentation. It will be about 45 minutes long if everything goes well. Regarding questions, we're quite a small group, which is great. So feel free to type your questions as we're going through if you want to. Otherwise, hopefully there will be time at the very end of this webinar for you to ask me some questions once I've finished with all the slides. Obviously, because this is a reasonably short session, I can't go through everything in detail. So there is more information available about clean athletics on the UK Athletics website. And we will have the website address during the course of this presentation. As Chris said, that this is going to be recorded and it will be posted online as well, so you can see that. So in terms of what I'm going to cover today, first of all, what is clean athletics and what it means to everybody, the concept and the principle of strict liability and how it affects anti-doping. I'll look at prohibited substances and methods, how you can find out what those are and how you can check your medication. We'll look at what happens if you need to use a prohibited substance therapeutically for a condition that you may have or one of your athletes may have. We'll look at supplements. I normally have loads of questions about supplements, about whether they're safe and how you can reduce risk, etc. So I'll address those. We will look at testing procedures briefly, so what happens when athletes are tested. And then the penultimate bullet point, anti-doping rule violations, ADRVs. So there's actually 10 anti-doping rule violations, so I'll run through those and the consequences should athletes or athlete support personnel can also have anti-doping rule violations. So what those are. And then finally, report doping in sport is UK anti-doping's mechanism whereby the athletics community can provide UK anti-doping with information about potential doping in the sport. So that's the basic overview of the webinar. So in terms of what is clean athletics, clean athletics is about knowing and respecting the rules, and it's everybody's responsibility regardless of your level of participation. So it applies to international athletes as well as athletes who compete at a lower level as well. It's not just about international athletics. We all have a role to play in clean athletics. But just to emphasize that any athlete under UK jurisdiction, and you become under UK jurisdiction if you're a member of a club or if you compete in a permitted event, can be tested both in or out of competition at any time. So once again, it's not just the elite athletes who can be tested, it is everybody. And then finally, the final bullet point is basically my job is to work for you guys effectively and to work for the whole of sport of athletics in the UK. So that's what I'm here for. My role is a positive role. We used to actually be called the anti-doping department, but we thought that was quite negative and didn't reflect the actual work that we do. Just to be aware of that. So I've just seen now I've got a message from Christine. Is there a minimum age for testing? There isn't. That's a really good question, actually. There isn't a minimum age for testing. It's fair to say that generally athletes over 18 or over are tested, but we can still test athletes who are under 18. The UK anti-doping rules do allow for under 18 testing, and by parents or guardians allowing their athletes to compete or be members, they consent to that testing. But it isn't something that we would normally routinely do. I hope that answers your question, Christine. But there is no specific age limit from the age that we can start testing athletes. Lovely. So so that's just a brief introduction about clean athletics. One of the main principles of anti-doping, and some of you may have already have heard of this, is strict liability. And strict liability effectively means that you're responsible as an athlete for what you ingest, what you take into your body. So if a prohibited substance is found in an athlete's body through testing, then the athlete is responsible for explaining how that got there. As a society, we tend to trust our parents, we tend to trust our doctors. So if a doctor or parent says you need this medication for a condition or for an illness that you have, we tend to accept that and take it. But actually, as an athlete, there is a further layer of responsibility there. So even if a doctor or a coach or a parent says to you that you need to have a medicine, even something like Lemsip or something, there are ways that you can easily check that. It is your responsibility. I do ask athletes to do that. It's really important as well that if something's found in an athlete's body through testing, it is irrelevant whether the athlete intended to cheat or use that medication to enhance their performance. So the anti-doping authorities do not have to prove that the athlete did that on purpose to increase their performance. So even if an athlete takes something in their body by mistake, that's not a reason for it to be there that's accepted by the anti-doping rules. So, so we've talked about prohibited substances and methods. So the way that you know what is a prohibited substance or method is through the anti-doping, the prohibited list. The prohibited list is published by the World Anti-Doping Agency, WADA. It's published at least annually on the 1st of January of each year, but it can be updated between Januaries as well, so it can be updated more often. Any changes are actually publicised before the 1st of January. They tend to be published on or around the 1st of October of the year previous to them coming into force. And WADA does helpfully tend to publish a little document which summarises the changes from the previous list. There doesn't tend to be a lot of changes. It tends to be reasonably standard in terms of what's included on the prohibited list. We do ask, however, athletes to check at least on an annual basis. So if they are using a medication which contains a prohibited substance or not, to just double check it to make sure that changes to the prohibited list haven't changed the status of that medication. And the prohibited list, even though it's drafted by WADA, it is adopted on behalf of the sport of athletics by World Athletics and the IPC. So they adopt it on our behalf, and it automatically becomes part of the rules that we have to abide by. So this slide really is just a demonstration that even medications which can be bought over the counter need to be checked. So in the bottom left-hand corner, you see there Lemsip. So I'm sure we've all had a cough or a cold and felt the need to take some medication, pop down the chemist and you buy Lemsip or something similar. So just be aware that even those kinds of medications can contain prohibited substances. So you will need to check if you do buy something like that. The version of Lemsip which is on this slide is the Lemsip Max Cold and Flu. There are different versions of Lemsips. There's quite a long list actually if you look at the different types of Lemsips, and they'll have slightly different ingredients. I will show you a website in the next couple of slides where you can easily check the exact version of Lemsip that you want to use and make sure that it doesn't contain prohibited substances. Another interesting one is insulin, the bottom middle picture there. And there will be athletes who have diabetes, who suffer with diabetes. Insulin is prohibited, so it's not allowed in or out of competition. However, if you do have a strong therapeutic need to use insulin, such as if you have the condition of diabetes, then there are ways you can tell the authorities about your condition and about your use of insulin, so that if you did test positive for insulin, there is a reason for that, which is already on record, so you wouldn't then have an anti-doping rule violation. So just quickly running through this slide, I said that there's a way you can easily check your medication, registered medications that you may want to use, and the way to do that is through something called Global DRO, which is, it's an unusual name, but the website address at the top of this slide. So you can go to that. It is really quick and simple to use, and you can use that for registered medication, and I'm just stressing that because you can't use it for supplements. We'll talk about supplements later on in this presentation. So the next few slides will show you how to use that. So this is the home page or the landing page of the site, and you can see there, for people who are good at their flags, there you've got Canada, UK, USA, Switzerland, Japan, Australia, and New Zealand. So at the moment, for those countries, you can check registered medication bought in those countries at the moment. Countries are added now and again, but those are the countries who are currently listed. And it is important to understand that because we talked about Lemsip earlier, but you may have a Lemsip which is sold in the UK, which is also sold in the USA, for instance, which may have a slightly different list of ingredients. So even though the product is the same, it's packaged the same, it's called the same, the American or the Canadian or the Japanese version may have a slightly different list of ingredients to the British version. So it is important you check the version of the country where you've bought it. So the next page, once you've selected your country, these slides aren't particularly clear to see, I apologise for that, but on the left-hand side it says user type, so you would use this little arrow which gives you a drop-down list, and you would say that you're an athlete, or that you're a coach, or an administrator, an official. Choose your user type, then you choose your sport, so for instance you would choose athletics. The sport is important because we talked about the prohibited list earlier, and there are, for beta blockers, in certain sports, beta blockers are prohibited, sports such as golf, darts and shooting, but these aren't prohibited in athletics or other sports. So there are certain medications which are of use or could be performance enhancing in certain sports, but not others. So it is important you select the correct sport. Nation of purchase I talked about earlier, so you would select, if you bought in the UK, you would select United Kingdom, and then in this box, in the box on the right hand side, I'm not sure if you can see the cursor I'm moving, for search for, so you would actually type in the exact name of the substance or the medication which you're looking to search. And you can see actually at the sort of left hand side there, it says top 5 searches: ibuprofen, paracetamol, etc., Lemsip. So those tend to be what people search, but obviously you can search for any medication you may be interested in. But just to emphasize at the bottom, when entering your medication, please be accurate with the spelling, because certain medications may have similar spelling, or certain substances similar spelling, but they may have different results. So in this example, it's an athlete from athletics, United Kingdom, nation purchase, and the substance they're looking for is Sudafed. And you'll see there, once you click on search, you have a list of all the different versions of Sudafed. I explained earlier about all the different versions of Lemsip. So you would then look down the list and find exactly the one that you're interested in. I think it says there's 13 different versions there of Sudafed. So you would look at that, find the exact one that you're interested in. You would click on the one you're interested in, and then it takes you to the next page, which is even smaller, more difficult to read. But this is Sudafed Elixir. So the status in competition is given as conditional, and the status out of competition is given as not prohibited. Not prohibited is self-explanatory. Conditional means that there are certain conditions to its use. So, for instance, with salbutamol, there are, which is an asthma medication, the condition would be that you can only use 800 milligrams in a 12-hour period, which is actually quite a hefty dose. But that's the sort of condition that you would find on there. Just to stress, in terms of in competition, what that means is that if an athlete is tested following a competition, a competitive performance that they've done, it means their body must be clear of that substance. So even if you took it 3 days before the competition, 4 days before the competition, there may still be a presence of that substance in your body. And if it's prohibited in competition, you would then test positive if that was the case. So if you do a search and you have out of competition not prohibited, but in competition prohibited, you can use it as long as you're not competing. And you would then need to take advice from your doctor as to how long before a competition you would need to stop using that substance for it to be clear of your body. Hopefully that's I've explained that clearly. So just running through the bullet points at the side, recheck you've entered the correct product, so that's making sure you've spelled it correctly. Check your route of administration as well. Some products may be allowed through one route of administration, but not through another. So you would need to check that. We've talked about the status of both in or out of competition. This is really important as well, there is a unique search reference, and that's at the bottom left-hand side of the results page. So make a note of that search, because it is evidence that you've done that search. All those references are unique. So you could either write that down, or you could take a screenshot of that page just as a record of the search that you've done. If for any reason you can't find the product that you're looking for, the advice is to contact preferably UK Anti-Doping, because they run the database in the UK, and just query it with them, and they'll be able to give you more information on that. So just another slide reviewing that. These are the countries that I talked about that currently use Global DRO. Check medicines yourself as the athlete, so please don't rely on anybody else, including your doctor, to have checked those for you from a sporting point of view. I talked about the search reference number and the screenshot, and you can only use this for medicines and ingredients only. You can't use this for supplements. Useful as well that Global DRO is available on a mobile app. So if you download the app, if you happen to be in a chemist or something, and you want to check a medication whilst you're in the chemist, you can do that. Okay, so I talked earlier about insulin, which is a prohibited substance but is essential if you have diabetes. So if you do use a substance which is prohibited but you need it, it's called you can apply for a therapeutic use exemption, a TUE. Once again, there have to be no permitted alternatives. So the first thing would be, if you had a condition, if a doctor prescribed you a banned substance, then you would have to ask the doctor, is there anything that I could use which would be effective but which isn't actually banned? And if there isn't, then you may need to apply for a TUE immediately. It is quite a complicated system of TUEs in a way, so depending on your level of competition, whether you're an international athlete, a national athlete, or a domestic athlete, would tell you when you need to apply for TUE. A national and international athlete would have to apply immediately. A domestic athlete would be able to apply once they've been tested and have a retroactive TUE. For advice about TUEs, you can look on the UCAD website, or what would be really easy to do would actually just be contact myself or a member of the Clean Athletics team and ask. A lot of people make an assumption that we have hundreds of applications a year for therapeutic use exemptions, but it's actually not. There's probably about a dozen applications throughout a year approximately. So we're not, this isn't, a lot of people have the preconception, both nationally and internationally, that there is a lot of athletes applying for TUEs. That's actually not the case. So across applications to World Athletics, the IPC, WAMA for Masters athletes, and for UK Anti-Doping, there are quite only a few applications per year that come through the office. So moving to supplements, so moving from registered medication to supplements, dietary supplements is a product which is intended to be ingested for to add to the nutrition through diet. I said that quite clumsily, sorry. So it's something which supplements the diet that you can get through food. And it could be vitamins, minerals, or things like protein or any other type of supplements. And they can be found in many forms, such as tablets, capsules, gels, liquids, or powders. It is actually quite difficult to gauge what percentage of people use supplements, so it's not always very clear. But certainly there is a market for supplements in athletics across all sports. As far as the message for the domestic message for athletics, we ask athletes to take a food first approach where possible. So where possible, trying to address your dietary requirements through food. So having a good balanced diet with all the things that you need to support your exercise and your lifestyle. We do appreciate that it isn't always possible. So some athletes may have dietary conditions, which means they can't take in enough of a certain part of their diet. Could be medical conditions, or it could actually be lifestyle situations, which means that they physically can't have enough nutrition through food to support their activity. So if you are looking at supplements, first of all, beware of unsubstantiated claims and do a lot of research on the products that you're looking to use. Some of these supplements can actually be quite expensive, and they don't always give you the benefit which the manufacturer would have you believe. So we strongly recommend that athletes do their research and make sure that the supplement they're looking to buy is actually effective for them, for the need that they want to address. But also understand that no supplement is guaranteed free from banned substances. With registered medications, which I talked about earlier, you can check those on Global Drone. You can be happy that what is in the product is actually what's on the labelling. With supplements, there is no guarantee. It could be that the supplement is contaminated, or it could be that purposefully the manufacturer could put something else in the supplement which isn't listed on the ingredients to improve its how the benefit it gives you. So there is never any guarantee that a supplement is free from banned substance. And thinking back to strict liability, you are still liable for what you ingest, even if you had no intention of cheating, and even if you didn't know that that contained a polluted substance. So there is a supplement position statement for athletics, and that's available on the UKA website on the Clean Athletics section. And it basically, there's 3 stages. So first of all, you say, do you actually need to use this supplement? Can you use a food first approach? Is this supplement going to actually be of a benefit for you? If you decide you feel you do need to use it, then understand strict liability, that it is your responsibility, even if you don't intend to gain an unfair advantage through using the supplement, and that there are consequences. We'll look at consequences at the end, towards the end of this presentation, and you can be disciplined for presence of the substance, even if you didn't know it was there. And then manage the risk, which leads me nicely into the next slide, and how you can actually manage the risks posed by the supplements. So there is informedsport.com, which is a way that you can check supplements to see whether they've been batch tested, and this can reduce the risk of you using supplements. So, for instance, say you wanted to use a protein shake, sort of a protein supplement or something like that. You can type in protein. It'll give you a list of different manufactured protein which have been through the batch testing procedure. You can also type in, I did a search earlier for SIS, which is Science in Sport. So you can pop that into your search field there, click on search, it'll bring you all the Science in Sport products. I had a look at something which is called Protein 20 bars. It's one of these protein bars. So I clicked on that. And then there was a list of all the batches of the protein bars that had been subject to batch testing. And the particular batch I looked at was vanilla cheesecake flavored, which isn't easy to say. So I looked at that. There was an actual batch number. So if I was interested in buying protein 20 bar vanilla cheesecake flavor, what I would then do is look on the actual box of the product I was looking to buy, have a look at the batch number, cross-check it against the batch list. If it matched, then I would know that that product and that batch had been through batch testing by Informed Sport. What that would tell me that it had been through the batch testing process and there hadn't no prohibited substance had been identified. So that would reduce the list, but it still wouldn't completely take the risk away that that product or any supplement could contain a prohibited substance. So just to emphasize once again, it's risk minimization only. One of the reasons why it can't completely guarantee is also the fact that Informed Sport can't possibly test for all banned substances when they do their batch testing. So they'll test for the substances which are most likely to be contaminants or to have been added to products. Just bear in mind, it is only the brands of a particular product which is tested. So just because some SIS products have been tested, it doesn't mean say all the products from SIS will be batch tested by Informed Sport. And as I said, note the batch number correctly, make sure it matches the product you want to use. And also similar to Global Joe, keep a record of your search as well. So you can use that if there is a problem further down the line. So I'm going to give my voice a little bit of a rest because I'm getting thirsty, so I'll have a drink. But what we have now got is just a very short video that will lead us into the testing part of this presentation. The video is just 2 minutes long, and it's just quite a nice sort of uplifting, punchy video, which hopefully you'll enjoy. So I'll pass you over to Chris to start the video.
Jeremy Clark.
Jeremy Clark, 5'8", male champion, doping control. It's waiting around after an event while your teammates are getting ready to go back to the hotel to watch TV. It's a guy following you around everywhere. It's reading forms and signing forms and reading forms and signing forms again. It's peeing into a plastic cup while someone watches. Sure, it's all of those things, but to me, this is way more. You see, I'm awesome, and a lot has gone into reaching this level of awesome. I strength train like a boss. Just yesterday, I lifted a small horse, and then I put it back down. I can now pretzel any yogi that crosses me. Namaste. I've aerobicized, carbicized, mental mind master ninja warrior eyes like you can't imagine. Pow! That's why this is 15 years, 3 months, and 2 days in kicking my own butt and counting. This is every time coach said I could when I thought I couldn't until I did. This is my little brother back home waiting his turn. Buddy, you need here 2 years. This is my respect for my opponent. Yeah, I'm talking to you. It's 5 a.m. training sessions, weekends on the road, and more trips to the hospital than I can count on 3 hands. Mom, Dad, thanks for not letting me hit the snooze button. I couldn't have done it without you. So a dude with a badge tells you've been selected for doping control? You know what I say? I say bring it, because I work hard and I come by every victory honestly. This is my love for the sport. To me, this pea is gold.
Thank you, Chris. So credit there to the Canadian Centre for Ethics in Sport, which is the Canadian equivalent of UK Anti-Doping, their national anti-doping organisation. And I really love that video. It's really short and punchy, and it's basically saying all the effort that athletes put into their training, into the commitment, the sacrifice that they've made and their families have made. Actually, by testing, by being tested, it's showing that they're a clean athlete. And by testing others, it shows that they're competing, or as much as possible, in a clean sport and against clean athletes. So I really like that positive sort of attitude towards testing. So I thought that was quite helpful. So moving on to testing now, just going through these questions. So Who can be tested? Anybody under UK athletics jurisdiction can be tested in the UK. So once again, regardless of level, whether you're competing domestic, nationally or internationally, you can be tested. And by jurisdiction, that means whether you're a member of a club or whether you're competing in a permitted event, that brings you under UK athletics jurisdiction. In terms of what is tested, then blood and urine is tested, is collected from athletes and analysed. It could be that both blood and urine is collected from the same athlete at the same time, or it could be that one or the other is collected. The blood and urine are used for different things and different. A lot of the endurance athletes will tend to be tested more for blood rather than urine, but they can be tested for both. In terms of when, athletes can be tested at any time. So some athletes will provide whereabouts telling us where they are at certain times, but they can still be tested at any time. Generally, testing takes place in a window between 5 in the morning and 11 o'clock in the evening. But even then, athletes can be tested outside the window if the testing authorities feel that that's what they want to do. There's nothing to stop them doing that. So there could be a knock at the door at any time. In terms of where, as I've said, athletes can be tested in competition, they can be tested at home, knock on the door at home without any notice. They can be tested at their place of training, or any other place as well where they can be located by the testing authorities. And why? And I think that's summed up, going back to the video, the reason for testing for me is to show that athletes who've dedicated their lives to their sport can show that the success that they're having is through hard work and dedication, not through the misuse of performance-enhancing drugs. And also that their competitors, both domestically and internationally, are also being tested under the same criteria, and hopefully there's a certain amount of parity that they're competing with. So in terms of athlete rights and responsibilities, this picture is showing you the notification of an athlete by a doping control officer. This athlete happens to be from swimming again. She's just finished a competition or training session perhaps, and she's been notified. So from the point of notification, the athlete does have a responsibility of staying within sight of the doping control officer at all times. And it is that way round. It's the athlete's responsibility to stay in sight and not the doping control officer's responsibility to keep up with the athlete. So for instance, if an athlete wants to take a warm down after they've finished, if they want to run around the park or something, that's fine as long as the doping control officer agrees and as long as the athlete stays within sight of the doping control officer whilst they're doing their warm down. So basically running around in circles. The athlete also has a responsibility to provide identification, to comply with the doping control procedures, and to report immediately to the doping control station. That reporting immediately is subject to certain things which the athlete is entitled to do between notification and reporting. So I've just explained there that the athlete can warm down. The athlete can actually finish a training session. If they're notified partway through a training session, they can finish that session as long as the doping control officer can remain in sight of them finishing that session. And also as long as the athlete doesn't urinate partway through if they're giving a urine sample. The athlete also has the right to have a representative accompany them through the process. And especially for athletes who are new to testing, I would strongly recommend that they do that. So at the point of notification, the athlete would say to the doping control officer, I do want my parent with me or my coach with me or another athlete to accompany me. And at that point, the doping control officer would chaperone the athlete to find that individual to accompany them through the process. I've lost myself. I'll find myself again. Here we go. Yes, sorry. So the athlete does have the right to ask for information about the process. So if there's anything that the athlete doesn't understand, they've got the right to ask for that information and to have a reasonable explanation from the doping control officer. And they also have the right to ask for a modification. So if, for instance, the athlete has an impairment, so for instance, say the athlete is visually impaired or has some other kind of impairment that they require a modification to the process, they can ask for that to be taken into account. So the different stages of the doping control process. So we saw in the previous picture an athlete being notified. Melanie, who's the DCO there, was showing her identification, and that's really, really important. What an athlete doesn't want is a complete stranger coming up to them pretending to be a doping control officer without any identification and taken through the process. So it's really important that the athlete asks to see the ID, and the athlete can refuse if the doping control officer doesn't have identification with them. Second stage is reporting for testing. So from the point of notification going to the doping control station, the athlete will be chaperoned at all times, and the athlete must stay inside of the doping control officer or the chaperone. Third stage is the collecting of the sample collection vessel, and you can actually just about see a sample collection vessel on the left-hand side of that picture. The athlete will be given at least 3 to choose from, and the athlete should closely inspect the vessel to make sure that A, it hasn't been tampered with, it hasn't been opened, it should be sealed, and B, that there's no sign of any contamination of that collection vessel. Because when the urine is collected in that vessel, you want that to be just the athlete's urine with no contamination in there as well. The athlete will then be accompanied to, once the athlete's ready to provide the urine sample, and I'm basing this on urine as opposed to blood, but the procedure is still the same for blood. Once the athlete is ready to provide the sample, they'll be accompanied to the toilet area where the athlete will be supervised and witnessed whilst they are providing the sample. So for urine samples, the gender of the doping control officer will be the same as the gender of the athlete. And once again, the athlete has the ability to refuse the test if the gender isn't the same because of the very personal nature of what's happening. So the doping control officer will, or the chaperone will accompany the athlete to the toilet and is asked to see the sample actually leaving the athlete's body. That is close supervision. Once the sample is provided, the athlete and the doping control officer will return to the table, and you can see that the athlete will be asked to select some testing kit, once again from a choice of 3. The testing kit will include 2 bottles. Step 6 of the procedure is that the athlete will pour the bottle between the two, pour the sample between the 2 bottles as instructed by the doping control officer, and will then seal the bottles as well. Both bottles will be sent to the lab, the A and the B bottle. The A sample will be opened and analysed. The B bottle will be stored intact, sealed as left by the athlete, and will only be opened if it's needed for a B sample analysis if the A sample proves positive. Step 7, testing the suitability of the sample. So if the athlete has overhydrated, has drank a lot of water, and the sample comes out almost purely like water, extremely weak, then it may be that the doping control officer, having tested that sample to see how weak it is, may ask the athlete to provide a second sample, and the athlete will be provided samples until the sample is less weak. So that's something that need to take into account. And then finally, recording and certifying the information. In the video, the guy talked about signing forms and checking forms and all that kind of thing. So the whole process is documented on a doping control form, and the athlete will be asked to check that form and sign the form to make sure that all the information on that form is correct. And I talked earlier about visually impaired athletes. This is where a modification may be that they ask somebody, a representative of their choice, to check the paperwork for them if they're unable to read the paper and sign the paper themselves. So for a full, there's a 15, I think it's just over 15-minute video on the Clean Athletics section of the UK website. You can find it by going to uk.org.uk and then clicking on governance, then Clean Athletics, and then Clean Athletics Education. And then you'll see there's a picture there of Lindsay Sharp stretching. The video is about 50 minutes long and is actually Lindsay Sharp being taken through a sample collection process. So you can see her notification and going through the actual process. Obviously, it's too long for me to share with you now, but please feel free to go along to the Clean Athletics section and have a look at that video. Just moving Quickly now to anti-doping rule violations. There are 10 of them, and I'll just very quickly go through them. So presence is where a sample is provided and there's a prohibited substance found in that sample through analysis. That's the one that most people think about. Use of a banned substance or method. So if the authorities have evidence that an athlete's used a banned substance or method, even if they haven't provided a sample containing it, and that evidence is sufficient to bring disciplinary action, then that can be done. ADRV 3, evading, refusing or failing to submit to sample collection. So an athlete can actually refuse. So we saw Mel notifying an athlete earlier. The athlete could say, actually, no, I don't want to be tested. That is an athlete's right, but there are consequences for that. So if the athlete doesn't have a good reason why, and I'm struggling to find good reasons why an athlete would refuse, then that could be investigated and go down as anti-doping rule violation. One of the horrible situations that we sometimes have in competition is where an athlete has finished the competition, they've got a flight booked for say 2 hours after the end of their competition, they've been notified for sample collection, and unfortunately they can't provide a urine sample. In those circumstances, we will bend over backwards to get the athlete through as quickly as possible, get the sample collected, but obviously nature has to take its course, and unfortunately if the athlete can't provide that sample, then they would have to miss their flight. We wouldn't let them leave the doping control station until that sample had been collected. So it's something for athletes who are tested regularly, they will need to build that into their schedule and make sure they don't have flights too quickly. ATRV 4, the whereabouts failure for athletes who provide whereabouts. Then if they have 3 failures in a 12-month period, that can be disciplined and they can be banned for 2 years. 5, tampering with any part of doping control, so giving false information or purposefully corrupting the sample that they provided. Possession. So this is quite recently, especially UK Anti-Doping do a lot of work with the border control, and there have instances where athletes have actually ordered online prohibited substances, and through ordering them, it's effective legally, it's deemed as profession once they order that, even if they haven't actually received that order, and they can be disciplined on the basis of possession, but also more directly if they have it on their person without any justification, reasonable justification for having that, they can be disciplined. Trafficking, obviously, and this sometimes applies to athlete support personnel as well, if they're trafficking prohibited substance into the country, or they can be prosecuted for that. Administration, so especially for an athlete support personnel as well, if they're administering a prohibited substance to an athlete, then they can be disciplined. Complicity, so if they're complicit in somebody else doping. And prohibited association is a relatively new one, and this basically means if an athlete's working with a coach who perhaps has been banned for doping, and they know that they're working with the coach they're working with has been banned, then they can be disciplined as well. So those are the 10 current anti-doping rule violations. Last few slides now, and I'm looking at the time, almost 7, which is perfect. So I've filled in the slide with the different ADRVs, and I've put in red how long the standard ban is for each of those. So you can see that this is quite serious stuff we're talking about. The standard ban for presence is 4 years, but there are circumstances with these ban sanction lengths when they can be reduced or increased with mitigating circumstances. Not only is, if an athlete has an anti-doping rule violation, they don't only have to think about the ban, there's also other consequences. So it could be that they lose sponsorship deals, that's the picture of the Coca-Cola logo. Moving down from that, their career could impact their career outside of athletics if they're looking to do other sorts of things which can be impacted by the anti-doping rule violation. The old style pound coins there, it could have financial implications. The medals, we've all seen medals which have been retrospectively taken from athletes due to anti-doping rule violations, which is actually a horrible thing to see. Especially for those athletes who were cheated at their moment when they should have had the medal but were cheated out of that by an athlete who's cheated. Moving straight down from the medals, you've got the emotional, mental, physical, so it can have health effects of an athlete, And then moving left from that picture, you've got that picture's meant to represent alienation. So somebody could be alienated because of their actions in cheating from other athletes or even friends and family, etc. So the implications are quite widespread, not only the sanction. And then this is the final slide before you have a final opportunity for questions. And it's just to make you aware of Report Doping in Sport, which is UK Anti-Doping's system allowing sports people to, or anybody with involvement or information about sport and doping, to contact them confidentially. You can call the UK's intelligence team on the number given. There is a hotline number which I think goes through to Crime Stoppers. That's managed on behalf of UKAD by Crime Stoppers. So you can give the information confidentially there. You can also go to the link and provide information. And you don't need rock solid evidence that doping has taken place to provide information. It could be that you've seen some suspicious behaviour, or that an athlete has changed their behaviour or changed their physiology over a short period, and you're concerned it could be down to doping. What UK Anti-Doping does with the information is collect it all together. It could be that they send out testers to collect a sample from that athlete directly. It could be that there actually isn't sufficient information to warrant testing straight away. So what they'll then do is just store that information, and it could be that another small piece of information that comes in the future helps them to build a picture which actually allows them to take more action further on. So if you have any information, please feel free to contact them as well. That comes to the end of the presentation. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope you found it useful, and I'll pass you back to Chris.